Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We are just waiting for the rest of the participants to come in from the waiting room, and then we'll get started. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the HESI SDG Publishers Compact Fellows webinar. We're very glad to be with you here today and to share with you the exciting work that's going on in the world of publishing and research, sustainable future for humanity and the world. So we want to start with introductions. We want to know who you are, and we will each be introducing ourselves a bit as the speakers come on and present the different concepts here today. So I sit as president of the U.S. Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development, and I'm also co-chair of the SDG Publishers Compact Fellows Action Group at HESI. Part of HESI, it's a wonderful organization that is welcoming, inclusive, and is doing great work in the world for a sustainable future. If you all who are participants today can put into the chat your name, your role, and your organization and your country, we would love to understand who's here today, and it will inform maybe some of the details of what we say as we go forward. There will be questions and answers that you'll be able to do towards the end of the meeting. So if you have questions along the way, you can put them in the chat. But it was towards the end of the presentation. So what's the purpose of today? The purpose of today is to provide an update on what the HESI Action Group is doing. HESI, or the Higher Education Sustainability Initiative, was brought together multiple UN agencies and many higher education networks and organizations for sustainable development to catalyze and accelerate the work that we need to do to have a sustainable future. And so our action group ended actions to better align education, research, and the sharing of research with making the world a better place through connections to the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, this is not about us today. It's actually about all of you who are participants and all of you who are listening to the recording afterwards, because each of you is in a unique and important position to help create a sustainable future. So we've gathered the trends, we've created tools and research to make it easier for you to do your work and to be recognized for it. So, of course, these are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. They're wonderful, and that they are things that we are doing across the world by working on the Sustainable Development Goals. You're part of a great family of humanity who has made a commitment to improve quality of life across the planet and to address all of these 17 issues that are very. So Scopus and the organization that it's a part of has done some research. And you can see here a graphic that shows how many publications have been produced just from 2016 to 2020. That's the data on each of these goals. And of course, you can see the large green bar is the goal with the most publications produced. 46% share of the total SDG related publications. And I want you to notice that ending poverty has got the least number of publications. So while it's a crucial topic, right? How can you have good health if you are living in poverty? It's much more difficult. How can we get you renewable energies, a clean energy future? How can you have quality education, decent work? All of those focus on what are the barriers when you're living in poverty. Looks like we could use a lot more research on that. But this is a useful slide because it shows you that's not the only SDG or Sustainable Development Goal that needs more research. Our agenda today. I'm Deborah Rowe. As you know, I'm giving the introduction here. And then Roger, who's my co-chair, will talk about the SDG Publishers Compact and our Fellows Program and action. Gerald Beasley will speak to top recommended actions and emerging trends. Once again, they'll each give a little line or two introducing themselves. I'm not going to do that right now. And then Joe Wixon will talk about what we're seeing as the emerging, it's not even emerging anymore, it's just the international trend we're seeing about changing how we structure abstracts and also doing plain language summaries and communicating to and with and co-creating with practitioners in the field. So she'll be speaking to that. And then Gerald will be speaking to assessing outcomes, not outputs, for tenure ratings and rankings, and a special task force that we have on that between two of our action groups. And then we have Marijke Van Staden coming to us from an association of mayors, thousands of mayors in under-resourced cities, to speak about how we as researchers can connect better with practice. And then Derek will be speaking about a rubric we have for textbooks and educational materials that checks whether those materials are doing well with integrating in with the SDGs and making sure they're covered. I'll talk about next steps. We have a solutions summit coming up on April 5th. We want to make sure you know about and how you can contribute to this bigger picture. And then we'll have the question and answer session. So that'll also act as a networking opportunity. We want you to be able to chat. That's excellent. You might want to just take some notes out of the chat so that you have it for later on. But I will tell you that the slides, the links, and the recording will be shared on the HESI website afterwards. And this event is about co-creation, so there are interactive elements. Please do comment and participate. And as always, we agree to treat each other with kindness and respect. So I'll hand it over now to Roger Worthington's Compact and the HESI Fellows Program. And just say next when you're ready, go to the next slide. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for the brief introduction. Welcome, everybody. I'm speaking to you from the United Kingdom, and with Deborah, I co-chair this wonderful group of fellows. Next. Okay, thank you. Now, you've already had a little bit of an introduction, so I will keep this brief. So you see that the Publishers Compact itself was formed and it now has roughly 300 signatories, so it is growing steadily. We believe that publishers have an important role to play in terms of pushing the SDGs, and that this venture, the Fellows Group, and the HESI initiative was a collaboration between the IPA and the UN publications team. And you see from the list of just the sample of some of the members' signatures of the group that we have some, very big well-known names, particularly within.
Yeah, and just one thing for those who don't know, the IPA stands for the International Publishers Association.
Okay, thanks, Deborah. So this is us. You'll see from the, if you count the images, there are roughly 20 of us, and we're a mixed group, mostly publishers, but not entirely. So we have representatives from academic societies, people with academic backgrounds, such as myself. We have some PhD students. We have librarians, and to some extent, becoming sustainability experts. So we have a breadth of experience and expertise within the group. Next, please. So we developed our own website. Please do take a look at this. It's very simple, just sdgcompactfellows.org. You can find out much more about us, our mission statement, who we are. You can get biographies on each of us. And of course, above all, you can find out about our outputs and about forthcoming events. And you'll be hearing much more about these from the presentation proceeds. Next, please. So above all, this fellows group is very strongly committed to SDG 17 because we have a number of partnerships already well established. You see here one with the European Association of Science Editors, one with STM, and another with a group of mayors mostly from the Global South, representing collaborations that we're forming and developing. So we're not acting alone. We're very keen to listen and to collaborate with colleagues and other organizations working within this space. Next, please. And I'll hand over to Gerald now.
I'll take myself off mute and speak to you. Thanks so much, Roger. Can everybody hear me? I hope so. I'm actually a librarian, and I'm speaking to you from Canada. And I just wanted to say that I have experience in the UK, Canada, and the US. Most recently, I was the Cornell University librarian from 2017 to 2022. And I must say, I'm absolutely delighted to be part of the SDG Publishers Compact Fellow group. So I'm going to take you to another member of the group. Next, please.
Oh, sorry.
So one of the things you will have seen flash up just before we get to this slide is a repeat of the slide that Roger's already shown you, which is my guide, and I hope will be your guide to the activities of the SDG Compact Fellows Group, that is to say, our website. Please make a note of it. Obviously, we are recording this session, so you can come. www.sdgcompactfellows.org contains everything I'm going to talk about this morning. Next. And one of the, I think, most important things we need to tell you is that we have on that site top action tips. And top action tips are the guide for all people involved in academic research and education, proceeding with Sustainable Development Goals. So whether you're a researcher, a student, a publisher, or an academic society representative, you may be a librarian, you may be a practitioner, all of you will find something on that website through the top action tips. And I do recommend that you take advantage of our first thoughts, so to speak, by visiting the top action tips on our website. Next. For example, if you're a researcher or a student, the top action tips, each of which generally run to about 10, 11, or 12. These are 3 examples. If you would be asked, or it would be recommended to you to pick an SDG, to work backwards from it, so to speak, in your research, and to create a roadmap. So that's one example. There are many. Another example. So if your main goal is to connect research and practice, and this often is the publisher's prime role, then again, we have top action tips for you. You should be setting the scope, and you could be creating a special collection. You could be seeding research ideas. We have more tips for you on that website that I already mentioned. Next. One of the things the audience will want to do is to decide, well, what am I going to do first out of these? Am I a researcher? In which case, am I going to align my research to the Sustainable Development Goals, to the SDGs? Am I not so much a researcher as somebody who wishes to connect? Of course, you may be both, but maybe you wish to connect researchers with practitioners. One of the things we're very concerned with, and I will return to this topic, is that we actually connect research. That is a primary goal of the Publishers Compact Fellows. So I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Jo Wixon, who will speak a little bit about communicating practical applications of research in abstracts. Jo, next.
Thank you, Gerald. So I'm Jo Wixon. I'm Director of Portfolio Strategy for our Global Journals programme at Wiley. And I started out as a biomedical researcher before joining publishing. And so really feel a very close connection to the value of research in the real world. And so this is a part of our work that I've been particularly involved in. So if we can move on to the next slide. As Gerald mentioned, our top action tips for connecting research and practice also recommend sharing the practical implications of research with people out in the real world, not in academia. We've expanded on that work to produce a couple of resources. So for research to have an impact in the real world, we need to share the practical implications of it with those who can actually enact change. And the potential audiences fall into two groups. So on the left, we're looking at professionals and practitioners working in the field who've gone through field-specific training and so are familiar with some of the terminology. They need that to answer their questions in their daily work and be able to make changes to enable us to reach the UN SDGs. On the right-hand side, we have policy in the public. They need clear information and steps and actions that they can take or pitfalls they can avoid. And that needs to be plain and clear so that they can take action in their own lives. So what we found in our recent, if I can move to the next slide, in our recent Solutions Summit, where we convened with publishers and editors, was that a good proportion of them, 50%, are already doing this to some degree, either policy maker and practitioner in plain language summaries in their articles, and a further 15% were starting to or about to start to, of the people who answered our survey. So this is a really promising trend among publishers. But if I can have the next slide, what we then have learned more in our interactions with researchers themselves is that they feel that they're not really trained and can feel ill-equipped and even unconfident to write some summaries in plain language for people outside of academia. So we've produced a couple of author guides to support publishers in doing this and guidance about how to move forward. These connect with examples from other organizations such as Open Pharma, who've done an immense amount of work on plain language summaries, and show examples from other publishers. So here what we're saying again is to steer your summary to the main audience of the findings of your research. So if your findings are more relevant to professionals in the field, that's a specialist audience. You might use some of the terminology. They need to be very practical bullets, quickly find them. If you're looking more at, say, the public or less scientifically trained audience, then you're really looking to use very plain language with clear take-homes in your abstracts, and these can be bullets or plain language summaries, and ideally supported with engaging formats that people with different learning styles might appreciate. So this could be videos, infographics, and getting it out there on social media. So the guides have advice for authors on how to achieve these two different tones, depending on what they need, with examples to guide them as they move along and try and really share that knowledge in the real world. So we hope you'll take a look at those, and if you're from a journal or if you're an author yourself, that you might find them useful. And now I'll hand you back to Gerald, who'll talk about our important work on assessing outcomes, not outputs, for tenure, so ratings and rankings work. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks so much. Yes, I am co-chair of something called a joint task force on outcomes and impacts. And it's called that because it's a joint task force between the ratings, rankings, and assessments action group, the Fellows Action Group that we're describing today. And I'm co-chair with a member of the first of those groups, Kathleen at McGill. And I'm going to talk briefly about it, and everybody might already have in their heads, well, what's the difference between an outcome and an output anyway? So next, please. I'm going to give a very brief definition, and you'll see, I hope, why we consider ourselves to be a very not entirely happy with mere, as I call them, inputs and outputs. We actually want to change the world. So we want outcomes and impacts. And if you have time to look at this slide, you'll see that there is a definition. These are pretty standard definitions, by the way, but they're applied to our field, of course. What we want to do is to make sure that what is being assessed is an outcome with a sustainable development impact on the world. What we feel and what we know is that a lot of the things that are easiest to measure are either inputs or outputs. So it's a tough nut to crack. This is really a challenge, and we need your help on this, frankly. So if you can help us, please come up with your suggestions. We are working towards a world where research has outcomes that can be measured, impacts which are longer-term effects. And we want that for the world because we want, obviously, a more sustainable world. We don't want something simply where we know how unsustainable we've become. Next, please, Deborah. So, as I said, it's a joint task force, and we're so fortunate, I find, to have people who are representing rankings, ratings and assessment missions such as Times Higher Ed and others, helping us think through this issue of outcomes and impacts. And it's been a major task for us. We're not going to come up with easy solutions. As I said, you know, one of the things that is very clear to everybody when we meet, which is about once a month, is that we've chosen a difficult task and we're going to need your help on it. But that's okay because things are difficult sometimes. Important. They're just difficult. So let's all pull together and work out how to actually create a sustainable outcomes out of the inputs and outputs that we may be getting from the research world. Next, please. This is just a very brief, but I find very, very cogent and very good summary of the problem that we need to tackle. Building on an emerging international trend, you'll see that somewhere down on this text. And if you have time to read it, either now or during the recording, or when you go back to it, I recommend this as a straightforward summary of the issue we're currently facing and we need your help on. I'm now going to pass you, I believe Marika has arrived. Has Marika arrived? I'm hoping so, and I'm going to pass you on her from ICLEI. Thank you.
Yes, she is here, and welcome. Now, before we go on, I just want you all to imagine something. I want you to imagine a world where instead of measures of academic success are in how many citations there are on your article, and we're kind of bouncing around in our silo of academia citing each other, that we know is an imperfect measure, that instead said that you're in terms of what impact it had on the world. And what would it look like in terms of measures from practitioners saying, yes, I understood the implications of your research and we applied it and that was useful. Thank you. And so how could we set up those kinds of measures and how could we be better connected to the practitioner organizations? I'll tell you that a personal story before I hand it over to Ickley, which this all for me and here to study others came from, I just noticed my camera's off, I'll put it back on, came from going to a World Sustainable Development Conference. And there was a panel of journal editors and researchers. And I said to them, how do you figure out what you're going to put in as themes for the journal, as requests for journal issues, or just as a researcher, your research agenda? Do you talk to the practitioners in the field, to those who are actually working tools, to find out what their front edge issues are for research? How do you do that? And I must tell you, unfortunately, that the whole panel said, we don't do that. We need to do that. It was a very much like a deer in the headlights look and a moment for me of, oh my goodness, what a gap. Now, I'm not saying that goes on all over. I think there are parts of our academic research world that are more connected to the real world practitioners, but clearly, and much of our best research results never get to the practitioners. So we're just trying to fix that system. And that's why we have practitioners as well who are fellows. And now I'm going to hand it over to Ickley and Marieke van Staden. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
And just tell me when you want to go to the next slide.
It's wonderful to be with you all. Thank you for the invitation. And linking on what Gerald said, I love that statement, focusing on outcomes and for sustainability. If we could go to the next slide, please. So very briefly introducing ICLEI for those of you who do not know us. We're called ICLEI International Local Governments for Sustainability, ICLEI in brief, and we're a global network of local and regional governments. At the moment, more than 2,500 of them in 125 countries, and we work very closely with these subnational governments to help them develop or fine-tune sustainability policy and drive location, the SDGs basically. We have around the world 24 offices with about 600 experts working very closely with our local and regional governments. Next slide, please. Nope. So what do we do in practice? We really try and be hands-on, drive that sustainable development agenda to make sure that there's good quality of life, working with the cities, towns, and regions in our network, and research is and also tracking innovation and making sure that we're on top of whatever is moving in order to advise our subnational governments, of course. Now, that research policy practice interface that you've heard of is very much embedded in our daily work. We have a global research strategy that informs us and also helps us connect to the research and academic community, because we know we cannot do this by ourselves. We need to have a strong partnership space and making sure that we give correct advice to help our decision makers make the right choices in turn. We also inform and influenced in the internal agendas themselves, but also representing our subnationals in the climate negotiations, in the biodiversity negotiations, on any possible topic that is relevant to a particular territory. And there we can move forward, again, also working hand in hand with publishers and with our academic colleagues to make sure that the messaging is right and aligned. I think it's really important to help national governments understand what needs to happen to move forward at a faster and more efficient tempo to implement sustainable. Next slide, please. So if we look at the perspectives that we bring to the table. We know that especially the smaller cities, but not only, our big cities are also in a very difficult position, making sure that they can benefit from existing academic research. So it needs to become more accessible, and it's really urgent to make material more widely accessible and again, that language that I heard earlier, easy language. Not all will help if we speak in a language that our policymakers cannot understand. So we need to make it hands-on and practical, looking at multidisciplinary expertise, of course. We are working with our territories. You're looking at all the sectors, energy, water, buildings, waste, you name it, but you're also looking at governance, good governance, access to finance. Systems thinking is very much the way we're looking at things. So addressing that complexity in a practical way, finding answers. We also see with the platforms that we run, such as CDP Equate Track, where we get collection of self-reported climate action and needs, that there's a need for more data collection. We know many of the universities and academics actually have wonderful collection mechanisms themselves. So it would be interesting to pool resources and do joint analyses to see how can we move forward from the moment where we are now, where we know we're not in a good space. If you look at it from a climate perspective or a biodiversity perspective, we need to step in, and again, using data to inform that knowledge base as well. For our work, there's always low-hanging fruit to identify easy, replicable policies and actions that might just need to be tweaked to make it tailor-make fit to a particular city's context. So help us with those lessons learned to make it more widely available as well, and help us avoid the pitfalls. There's a lot of time, I think, that is wasted. People don't like to share the negative pieces of lessons learned, but I think we need to step up on that particular piece. And I would urge all publishers, call for lessons learned, investigating bad practice and how not to do it, as well as good practice and best practice, so that we can leapfrog those pitfalls that we wish to avoid. A challenging piece is technology and innovation. We see there is a very limited scope in terms of in our local government. There are very few staff members who can constantly track everything that's new out and on the horizon. So we would like to bring up-to-date information on the latest technologies, what new technologies are being implemented or just being released that would inform policies down the line for the next decade. It's really important to get those approaches on the table as soon as possible, that they can be informed about it, and also showing definitely proven approaches, looking at both low technology and, of course, high tech. With technology effective, high tech is interesting because our leaders want to pilot new things in their territories as well. Support, certainly where we see a major need for support, is helping local and regional governments take a good idea. What could a local infrastructure project look like, and help that design move forward just from a pure concept to actual tendering and implementation process. So we help them through that whole pipeline up to the investment and making sure that they can proceed with actual action, local action. But again, it's a very complex space. There we work also with the financial sector, and we would love to connect to more universities and academics in the space of finance and project development and evolution. And last but not least, that local impact, proof of what is moving, where there is true outcome and impact, and helping identify the finance mechanisms to accelerate local sustainability action. I'd like to take a look at the opportunities for cooperation, and a very quick summary, because this is all pretty much essentially logical if you think about it. We can and would love to work with you to frame key research questions. What can be done to step up? What can take us to the next level? How can we serve those end user needs? And we can bring knowledge gaps to your users and make actionable research. We actually are doing research ourselves, very much from a practitioner perspective. So joining forces in that We want to co-develop and co-use knowledge generated. And again, that interdisciplinary community is important. Can we co-author articles, publications, case studies? We would love to contribute that perspective into the papers that you curate. We would love to make things more hands-on, again, for the end users, and in this case, our mayors, our governors, our technical municipal staff, and so on, to help them take the right choices. So look at them as a key audience as well, and your audience working with us, promoting open source materials. We'd be happy to do that with you and use those ourselves, of course. And last but not least, to enhance information, making it useful for the national governments, the local governments, the IPCC and other decision-making bodies and processes. There is a need, I think, for more detailed work, more fine-tuned collaborative work, and certainly that co-generated, moving from data to information, and is to be in as well. So I'd love to invite you to work with us as your practitioner at hand, so to speak. Back to you, Deborah.
I've been working with you for a number of months, and I just find your ideas absolutely on point with what academia can do to step up to its potential at this urgent time. And just thank you so much for sharing those ideas and for stepping up to be that collaborative partner with academia. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so why is this an empty slide? So I don't think I need to repeat it because she said it so beautifully, but I am going to just say, connecting with practitioners, what does it produce? A better use of our research, more informed and relevant research agendas. And we want your input. We want you to be co-designing your research with the world of practitioners. So which practitioner organizations do you connect with? We've made a commitment in the Fellows Action Group to find practitioner organizations, bring them into the academic space. And actually with ICLEI, we're planning something for the fall where we're going to do what's known as a research marketplace, where practitioners will give pitch on this and this and this, and then academic researchers will say, okay, I'm willing, I'll work with you on this project so that we can meet the urgent needs of humanity at this crucial time. So if you could put into the chat, which practitioner organizations do you connect with? And I will read off a bit from what I see in the chat. And if nothing goes into the chat, that's even more of a reason why we need to do more work to make sure that we are more connected to the practitioner world. So let's see. I see the question. So somebody's working with the Canadian Center for Ethics and Sport. Yep, I know of another project that's with the sports organizations to do net zero events. Other practitioner groups. Of course, we know in the health field, right, you have all sorts of practitioners. So there's the practicing doctors and other healthcare professionals, and there's lots of journals there. And oftentimes there is that interaction between the pure academic research and those journals. But what about in the area of wind power, solar energy? I spoke to somebody from a global wind organization the other day, and we talked about the gaps between the research that's needed in wind and what's going on in academia. Oftentimes, the practitioner organizations don't know what easy academic researchers. They find it to be glitchy, department by department, university by university, when they need technicians, even getting a hold of the TVETs or tech colleges and getting a smooth pipeline for job placement and retention and curricular updates that we'll talk about in a minute when we talk about educational materials. So a lot of gaps between the practitioner world and the academic world. So we've got somebody doing research on vocational education, working with both vocational teachers and national organizations of plumbing. In the U.S., we have the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance, where we bring together employers and educators, and but that's more on for us on that curricular side, less on the research. I'm looking to see what else is here. Higher education leaders, faculty, and educational developers in support of changing curricula, pedagogy, and systems. Wonderful. Once again, on the education side. Agriculture and farming organizations in support of business within families who own, the family farms, who are part of a larger farming organization. But the smaller ones, you can support sustainability of family farms. Great. Also, by teaching systems thinking, you can help the farmers influence the larger agricultural organizations. Okay. So let's keep going. TVET sector research, more on that. Wonderful. Organizations in the chat of practitioner organizations, we do want to invite them to the convening that we're going to be having, where we're connecting academic researchers and practitioners. Of course, we hope you will attend as well. You'll see that on the website under upcoming events. So that's what's coming up. But now I want to turn it over to Derek to talk about the tools that we have for you for assessing textbooks and educational materials. Derek?
Thank you, Deborah. My name is Derek Black. I'm a doctoral university, and I had the pleasure of joining the SDG Publishers Compact Fellows at its formation. So it's been a pretty exciting time. You've heard a lot about our goals as a fellowship, and one of our final goals for the SDG Publishers Compact Fellows and the Academic Societies and Textbooks Work Group was to increase the SDG coverage of textbooks and educational materials. Our work has taken several approaches, but our best results center around the SDG rubric developed by Hannah Ells. Next slide, please. A learning designer at Cengage. Rubrics help Rubrics help publishers identify the ways they can make educational materials higher quality and more effective. While the tool is designed for publishers, it is an open source and available tool on our website to ensure that other educational stakeholders, such as researchers, school leadership, and students, can benefit from the process of completing the rubric and analyzing the results. Next slide, please. The goal of using the SDG rubric, or as we affectionately call it, the SDGR, is to identify areas that can be more inclusive of and better aligned with the SDGs at the beginning of the writing or the revision process. The rubric itself is organized by the 17 SDGs, find both the targets for each goal, as well as a list of keywords that may help the author or the editor interpret the text on the page. Most importantly, the rubric identifies 4 major evaluation criteria for each SDG. Keyword usage, relevant and current scholarship, diverse examples of sustainable practices, and relevant examples that engage students. The SD designed to identify the SDGs in any textbook, as well as opportunities to incorporate more SDG-related content into non-scientific textbooks and academic articles, no matter the discipline. Next slide, please. Additional action lists and action tips are available on our website to help publishers, editors, authors, and readers use the SDGR, the SDG rubric, to its fullest potential. Back to you, Deborah.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And as a teacher, you can use this to see, am I using a textbook or other educational material that has the SDGs in there? And if not, as I've done in the past, you can call the publisher. Say, look, I'd like to continue using this, but it's not connected to the SDGs and it needs to. And by the way, if you need reviewers for that next revision, or you want to do an electronic revision immediately, which is what I prefer, we have people available to help you incorporate the SDGs into this book. And if you want to do it, fine. Sometimes the publishers even pay for that. If you don't want to do it, you can let us know at the fellows group and we will help find somebody to do it, because we do need to update the educational materials. I mean, come on, to get a degree in higher education and not be literate about the Sustainable Development Goals should be embarrassing to higher education institutions, and more than awareness, but engagement. And because we don't want to doom and gloom our students. We have too much of that going on, and the public as well. Let's engage them in solutions. So what are the next steps out of today? Well, please start putting those questions into the either question and answer section here or the chat. We'll get to those. We're going to have a conversation in just a little bit. But for everyone, be aware that out of the Fellows Action Group, we have a Solution Summit series. We know that it's important to focus and create the future of SDG-focused academic publishing. This is for all of these key audiences, right? Researchers, authors, practitioners, students, publishers, journal editors, everybody is welcome. You all have an important role to play. So we have a summit coming up. It is on April 5th. And here's where the invitation is. Please come and join us. Please share the information out. And the purpose of that summit, to help your research be more valuable, more attractive to the many journals now that are focusing on sustainable development or using it as a theme. Also to enhance communications between academia and practitioners, to inform the research agendas, relate them to the SDGs, and deliver research outcomes to practitioners that will help change the world. So please do join us on April 5th. It's just our website with /upcoming-events afterwards. And you can register there. So how else can you contribute? Well, take the actions using the top action tips lists that are on our website. Sign up to join our virtual community and get our newsletter. It's like on the bottom of the page when you go to the website, but the links for those of you who are here are going in the chat. Here's a form where you can sign up to be part of the virtual community. I know you're not going to memorize that, but it's in the chat and it's on the website near the bottom. Attend our next Solution Summit. That'll be with practitioners. That's after the one on April 5th. And if you missed the one on April 5th, if you're listening to the recording, we will be put this page after it's done. So congratulations on everything you've already done. I mean, those of you who are listening to this, you're already seeking information and taking actions, and we honor you for that. But even more so, congratulations on all you will do next, not only as an individual, but to help change the system so that tenure and promotion, rating, rankings, and assessments, and the other incentives in academia align with creating a more sustainable future for all. So give you this email if you want to connect with us directly, please do so. We check it not every day, I can tell you honestly, but we do check it regularly, and we do want to hear from you. And then let's go to questions and answers. So, Jordan, I don't know when you want to stop the recording. If you want to continue with the questions and answers, that's fine. And has anybody been monitoring the chat for questions that maybe we should address? And I also...
Deborah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought Julia asked a really interesting question, or made a comment actually, and Julia Christensen Hughes will be known to some of us but may wish to talk about it. It's around action research and the importance of action research. Julia, can I ask you just to repeat the comment, which I thought was excellent?
Thank you, Gerald. I appreciate the opportunity, and hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be part of this today, and I just want to congratulate all the speakers. I thought you did a fabulous job of synthesizing the really important work that's underway. So yes, as I was listening to the remarks, it really took me back to my doctoral studies, where action research was something that was really encouraged. You know, where researchers go out into communities that are wrestling with important questions, co-design the research, engage in the research, present the results, observe the reaction of the community to those results, and sort of follow them through to a next step. And in fact, I used what's called a critical ethnography in my own research. My background is business, and I was studying an organization that was trying to implement an employee empowerment strategy and use that approach. And I can just personally attest to how powerful it is. Learns is phenomenal, you know, as does the community. And it can have a lasting impact far beyond anything that's ever written, right? It's the actual authentic engagement in the moment. But it does take a very particular set of skills that I'm not sure many of our doctoral programs actually focus on developing. You know, so we talk about how to enter and exit a community professionally. There's a different sense of integrity, right, of commitment and shared understanding of process and confidentiality. It can be very human and very messy and uncertain. And you know, so it's really going through my mind right now is what do more. Well, it doesn't even necessarily be a doctoral program. It could be undergraduate research. It could be master's research. The professoriate need to be confident in engaging in this kind of research approach that I think could have a profound impact on the questions that we're wrestling with. But I'd love to hear what others are thinking of this idea.
So yeah, thank you. I just want to mention, Julia was on the original group with the International Publishers Association, UN Publishing Office, Elsevier leadership, who are all to start this Compact Fellows program. So she actually is one of the co-founders of it. And she also is president of a college. So she's been a real leader when she was dean of a business school at creating these kinds of systemic changes and working to get them institutionalized. So I think that we can look at any other questions that are here, or I want to then, if you don't have questions, let's open it up to comments. I have one comment to kick off, which is I'm a big fan of action research. I agree with what you've said, of course. I also want to mention we have another action group that I also run called Education for Green Jobs, and it's about the incredibly urgent need to stabilize our climate passes in the next 7 years by 50%. And I encourage you to listen to the recording that's already on the HESI website. Jordan, maybe you can put in the link in the chat to the HESI website, but you guys can all look it up and you'll see the links to the recordings. We also have a wonderful partner, one of whom is actually in the audience today, and that's the Green Learning Network. This, again, is multiple UN agencies that came together and actually handed over one of the discussion groups in their Green Growth Knowledge Platform, Green Forum. If you go to thegreenforum.org, you will see all sorts of wonderful discussion groups in there. And they gave a group to the youth. And the youth are an organized coalition of youth for climate education. They turned around and gave that Green Learning Network to us, to the adults. They said, you guys have to collaborate and share your wonderful platform. You can look for the Green Learning Network. Thanks for taking the slides down so I can see these beautiful humans. And other comments or questions? And Jordan, is it possible for people to raise their hands and we can unmute them?
I am not sure, but we could try if anyone
There you go.
There was a comment earlier on from Kathleen Rodenberg about having a special issue in a top business journal with a separate paper focused on each of the separate goals, and other papers that combine some of them would be an interesting idea. And so just to reflect as one of the publisher speakers, that right there with you, we've got in fact a business and sustainability journal that's doing exactly that sort of work. Really love where you're going with that. And quite a few of us have SDG articles. So we're thinking about building a resource or a page on our site to signpost some of those to help you find them, because we're aware that just because we built them doesn't mean you know where they are. So that's another piece of work that we're active in right now. Thank you. Great idea.
And it looks like Virgilio Rivera would like to speak. Go ahead. But you'll need to, let's see. I'm going to ask you to there you go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for this opportunity to speak. My name is Virgilio from Mexico. I represent a civil association that it's called Uso Inteligente. That means smart use or wise use. We have 7 main objectives: education and work, human population control, water care, nutrition, pollution reduction, species protection, and ecosystems care. Everything that all the experts have shown and the HESI have shown is very interesting for us, because we have different projects that we've related with the 17 SDGs. Direct collaborate with schools, mainly with universities as ITESM, UNAM, Politécnico Nacional. We work with young people and teachers in social services, volunteering, even in projects. We have more than 1,855 schools in the 32 states in Mexico. All the projects are very interesting. Some of them goes with governments, with society, with different locations around any of these objectives. I know that I have a lot of work to do with all the information that you have shared. And the difficult part for us is to guide teachers from indigenous education, for example, and to include their projects and their information in different platforms, or to guide them to share that information properly, so we can support project leaders to share their information. Otherwise, for me or for the team of directors of Smart Use, will be impossible to include all the initiatives. We have 16 key projects. Some of them are included even in the UNDESA platform. We have shared some with HESI, but one of co-create educational content, literary drawings, audiovisuals, and everything. The story of Uso Inteligente as a copyright is shared as a social practice that goes very aligned with what you're saying, the practices and the actions for any person at their own level, even if they're kids, young people, or adults working in different. I would like to ask what would you recommend for this kind of associations that have different projects that can be aligned with the programs that you have shared with us? Thanks for the time, and greetings to all. Have a great day and a journey around this agenda.
Thank you. Thank you. Who would like to speak to that question? Anyone on the panel?
I'd just like to say that you're doing fantastic work, Virgilio. We need your thoughts. We need your experience. We have some guides. We have some thinking around this. We have some great development. Your experience would be invaluable, and I hope we'll be able to rely on it a little bit as we try to move forward. These are knotty problems, and as you know from your personal experience, getting teachers to be guided in the right direction, that's a tough thing. It's something we have to achieve. We have a limited amount of time ahead of us. We really need to move quickly and effectively in the right direction. Helio, you are a great example. So that would be my comment, Deborah.
Okay, I have a couple thoughts, which is go to thegreenforum.org, sign up for the Green Learning Network. You will see there places where you can put in your knowledge items, so all the projects can be documented in there. Also, at HESI, we have where you can join as an organization and be a HESI partner. And then we do want to highlight what it is that you're doing. So we can build it into, future presentations. We can build it into events that we have. And so that's another forum. The communications piece is messy, but part of it is finding the networks. And so if you look, there are UN listservs, and you can go on to the UN listserv, like SDG news at googlegroups.com. I may not have said that perfectly, but look up UN listservs or Google Groups. And then you can put out the announcements of what you're doing. Through UNESCO, they're looking at the pedagogy for teaching about sustainability and engaging students in real world projects. And so they've had an international network where you can share what it is that you're doing as a promising practice and learn from others. One of the things that I love to do, and I'll finish with this, I used to give a lot of keynote speeches. I don't give keynote speeches very much anymore. What I do instead is I walk into the room and I say, would everybody take out a small slip of paper? Would you please write down where you're feeling stuck? Would you please pass that to the front of the room? And then I spend my keynote speaker time talking about how you overcome systemic change at the accelerated level that we need. We just have to stop letting the hierarchies be our barriers, or wasting time in meetings be our barriers. I mean, the youth are looking at us and saying, what's happening. What are you doing? And the good news is there's lots of progress too. Once you connect to others, it gives you a less anxiety urgency and more excitement urgency. So I encourage you to find out about those networks, whether it be in the university K-12 and practitioner collaborations ones. And we want to learn more about you. And thank you for putting your contact information in the chat. We appreciate that.
If I could add one thing very quickly, Deborah. Sir, I think that what you're doing, just to reiterate what Gerald said, is amazing. And as Deborah mentioned, there are a lot of tools alongside those networks that can help your students. As a doctoral student, School of Teaching and Learning here at ISU, I understand that students often feel make or break. If they don't succeed, then it might have been a waste of time. And one thing that you can do is take that our SDG rubric and help the students as they're documenting, as Deborah said, find the keywords, the terms that associate with their individual project in the SDGs, and they'll be able to associate their targeted successes, see how their actions are making a difference, even if they can't see it in the grand scheme of things, even if they aren't able to acknowledge their project as self. What they can do is they can go through the rubric, they can pick out different targets, different parts of different SDGs, and see how they are contributing in a measurable way. So I just want to mention that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So I also am going to put something into the chat. This comes not from me. It actually comes from a youth coalition called Change the Chamber Lobby for Climate. And it is a toolkit on how to be an environmental change maker, just how to be a change maker. may also want to look up Ashoka, ASHOKA. They also are very emphasized in their programming and how to help people be change makers. And there's a lot there on coping and persistence and handling disappointment and finding coalitions of support and looking for leverage points for systemic change. So a lot of usable, what they found to be very helpful in the work that they've been doing. Okay, so I want to go over to the question that David has. We don't have a lot of time left, but I want to acknowledge it. David, this is David Steingard, and he asked this question in this in the space of outputs versus outcomes. Is there some kind of gold standard which would demonstrate how a piece of academic research, whatever it may be, an article, a book, a white paper, a case study, which is in written form, transform real world situations? Would it be policy adopted by practitioners? How many times a piece is cited and read, but by whom? Not just other academics, right? And what are the limits of what we can expect of academic research to have impact in the real world? I would say we sit within those limits all the time. And instead, what are the expanded outcomes and impacts instead? What breakthroughs in assessment, evaluation, and content do we need to inspire this relevance of academic research beyond the ivory tower, so to speak? He says, so David, thanks for the questions, but I actually think your work has part of the answers. And I'm wondering if you want to share that with us today, or if you want to keep it under the radar for some reason. So if you raise your hand, I am more than glad to unmute you, and you could, say a few words about that. Do you want to? Here, I've just asked you to unmute.
Yeah, am I good? Oh, it looks like
Yeah, you're good.
All right. Well, thank you, Deb. Yeah, and I think, and I'm going to get involved with the Joint Task Force, and Kathleen Rodenberg and Julia. We actually had a call this week working on research, and I think the big challenge on the impact is we have to look at what we're actually writing about and who is reading that and where it is going. And one of the things that's become really apparent in my work, and I put a link earlier into our intensity journal ratings that we are doing in concert with Cabell's, and Cabell's is on the SDG Publishers Compact Fellows as well, Lucas and Clarice, is that there really isn't in the journal metric measuring bibliometric universe, other than the variety of impact factors, from Google Scholar to Clarivet, every company has their own. These are all what we call citation intense metrics. They count referential, the referential nature of a paper, how many times it's read and how many times it is cited in what sources. And very innocently, I think over the last couple of years, when we started applying, you can't make your toast anymore without ChatGPT, we innocently came upon the idea that you can look at the content of journals, and just like you had the opening slide, Deb, where all the SDG action is, and it is coming to be the case that the lion's share, and I'm in the business school journal world, of journals that we're evaluating are dismal, to use the dismal reference here. They just don't connect in any real substantive way, by and large, to the pressing needs of the SDGs. So all of what I heard today about changing abstracts and keywords and doing different things, we have a real focus issue just in the very nature of the subject matter. So, and then, Gerald, you were talking about and I call it like the holy grail of when we know a piece of written work, words into worlds, we've got to get the words right before we can even think about the impact. Sorry, that's a little proselytizing, but I think this is a welcoming audience, and I love preaching to the choir. So thank you, Deb, for that opportunity.
Yeah.
David, I'm interested, Deb, if I can take a second.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for your support on that point, that it's really about translation into real world results and real world change. David, completely agree. The best we got at the moment, which does look at what we would say is attention to the articles. So it looks at whether they're mentioned in a policy document, whether they're used as a reference in a Wikipedia page, whether they're mentioned on Facebook or Twitter. Those get lower scores, as you might imagine, than being in a policy paper, whether it's been mentioned in the news. So it's getting there, but yeah, it's not specific to SDGs. That's the thing. And so a paper can receive attention for all sorts of reasons, for amusement value, sadly, as well as for its real, that sensation of noting SDG relevance, scoring it, tagging it is very strong for us. We had a work group on that, on the idea of a taxonomy, which we've handed over now to the SDGs, the STM, SDGs Academic Publishers Forum. So STM is one of our trade associations, so it can bring together lots of publishers. And we're working on a shared set of search terms to try and help each publisher be able to identify which of their articles are truly SDG relevant to which SDG. For example, an institution, a big university would be able to say, this much of our output was SDG relevant related to this SDG, that SDG. So yeah, we're trying to get there. It's hard, as you say. How do you measure the real outcomes? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so David still hasn't talked about his work, but we'll have him do that at a future webinar, because I think it holds a lot of potential for the answers to these questions. So it says in our ongoing joint task force and bibliometrics, I think, focus. So we're out of time. I'm going to ask for closing comments. And of course, this is not the end of the conversation. April 5th is very much a continuation of this conversation, but there will be additional data that we'll be sharing and opportunities. So please do join us then by just going to the sdgcompactfellows.org website and clicking on upcoming events.
Yeah, I just again wanted to thank everyone very much for joining in, and I personally look forward to engaging more regularly with this group. Some of the research that Kathleen and I have done has really looked at the challenges of bringing relevant research to market quickly, and for a variety of reasons. I think one is just simply the publication process challenges. I think a lot of the publishers are probably facing with the peer review. But as well as some of the gatekeepers and, you know, who read for which journals. And I'm thinking particularly within the business school landscape and FT50. So we've done some research unpacking that in terms of whose voices are welcomed, what kind of data, what geographies, what questions. And then of course there's time to publish. And if a journal is taking 2 or 3 years to get that work out, then its ability to have impact when we have such pressing needs is really compromised. So those are questions I'm personally really interested in exploring. And I just, again, thank everyone today.
So thank you to you, Andesa, for hosting this. Thank you to HESI for empowering this action group. And we have a lot more to do. I will leave you with this. Let's not sit around and do armchair pontification about this. The world needs us to empower effective action. So we want to move to practical action as quickly as possible. Use those top action tips, everybody, and connect with us so that we can accelerate this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye for now.